by the way, because of the pandemic and everything, the MWR debate with the presidential and vice presidential candidates will be happening Thursday from 7 to 9 o'clock. So please do come.
Well, then I guess since everyone is here, we'll get started. So first of all, thank you, Mao and Siwen, for coming onto the podcast. I really appreciate it. And today we're just going to talk about election, general procedures, infraction, and past behaviors of the candidates and the candidates themselves. We are allowed to talk about them a little bit.
Definitely. Very excited to be here. Thank you again for having Siwen and I here.
So my first question is actually regarding Congress transparency about the past elections. So there have been some students and concern regarding the transparency behind some of the past elections. For example, the infractions were not exactly, let's say, publicized that much. Not in a bad way, but Congress sort of hushed it up a little bit. So could you expand a bit more on that and the past infractions and why were the infractions given?
Yeah, so if we were to go back a little bit to what happened last semester, we have a part in our Congress bylaws actually that says that if a candidate reaches 25 infraction points, then we will publicly announce it to the rest of the school. Now, keeping in mind with all the different circumstances that we're in, A, we're in a pandemic, B, we're all in an online setting, C, no first year know each other, you guys have all met each other either online, maybe you hung out with a few friends outside of class, but that's kind of really it. So with all that in consideration, it would have been simply inhumane to name the candidates that got infraction points and to just like publicly shame them on whether it was like our Congress website or like on our Facebook page. That would have simply been inhumane, and it would have kind of literally detrimented their future at Marianopolis. And so keeping that in mind, we also wanted, as you mentioned, to be as transparent as we could. So with that in mind, we, like, everyone knows in which position the candidates have been omitted, and on top of that, they also know why they've been omitted. So they know exactly the infraction points. They know if it's a major or a minor infraction. So all of these kind of happened last semester. With that being said, we published this on our MSU page and on our website, the two most platforms that MSU students use. And obviously we can't keep it in forever because, again, it is a loophole that, you know, there is a moral type of concern in it, you know. So yeah, with the circumstances, this is the most transparent that we could have been, because ultimately you guys do, like, I'm pretty sure you guys figured out who ended up being disqualified and who ended up being in. So yeah, that's kind of all I have to say about that. I don't know if Siwen, you want to add something to that.
Yeah, Congress has always been very transparent on their discussions and on their affairs. As executive of Mari News, I attend most of the weekly meetings, and I do remember for last elections, they were very open about discussing the infractions that occurred. They even posted the list of infractions with candidates, but anonymously. We did write the Congress weekly report that week after the elections. We mentioned what happened, but we did not go into details. We did not mention their names because we protect the privacy of our students.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I completely understand the anonymous part. And personally, if I were a candidate and if I committed something wrong, of course, I also want my identity to be protected. So my question then would be, do you think there would be a way to elaborate more a bit on the infractions, for example, to clarify more rules on infractions and therefore allow the candidates to, in the future, to avoid those infractions? Do you think Congress could maybe generate a set of laws that's more concrete than just saying, for example, not limited to this, but this might also be considered as infraction? Is it possible for the Congress to make something clearer?
So right now, the way that it's put out is that you know exactly what you're allowed and what you're not allowed to do. So you have a set of like things that you are allowed to do. So this includes, you're only allowed to post on the MSU Facebook page. You're only allowed to have 2 posts a day. So these are certain guidelines that all candidates know about. They've always been known about. If you are a candidate and if you're interested in running, then these are things that you would know beforehand. Now, when the ERC meets with the candidates, it's to make sure that they completely understand it, because the whole point of having infractions is to make sure that the elections happen in a safe and fair way. Because if not, then like, say like Siwen and I were running and there were no infractions, and Siwen could make 500 posts a day on Facebook and I could only post one, and it just makes it unfair. So that's kind of like the in terms of like the guidelines of electoral rules. Like, they're pretty simple, they're pretty straightforward. Now, what we kind of need to talk about, I guess, at this point is infraction points, and how we kind of translate like things that are illegal, quote unquote, to like infraction points. And I can totally understand as to why that could be confusing, but still, again, it's really not that complex. It's like, if for example you have like a missed endorsement post, you would obviously get a minor infraction. So these are things that are listed out in the elections guide. These are things that are listed out in the Congress bylaws. So things that are out on the website, open. If candidates come to me and let me know that they want something a lot more clear and concise, and the ERC will be more than happy to work on that. But so far, at least from what we've seen in the previous semesters and the previous years, it seems to be pretty okay. I don't know if Siwen, you want to share something to add to that?
I mean, MWR doesn't do much with the demerit points.
Exactly. Yeah. So never mind.
I'll let Camila go first.
Great, thanks, Henry. So on the same topic, actually, while going through some of the like rules and regulations when it comes to election and what the candidates are and are not allowed to do, I came across one of the things that are considered to be a major infraction, which is listed here as violation of fair play. And I was just wondering if maybe one of you could elaborate a little bit on that for like the average viewer like myself to understand what's the context behind that, because just the term fair play as a whole might be a little general for an average MSU member like myself.
Of course, definitely. So one of the reasons as to why it's vague is because, just to answer like the part of it being a little vague, one of the reasons as to why we say like fair play, not something more specific, is simply just because it depends on the circumstance, it depends on the situation. That's why we have a different ERC committee that renews every semester with every election, because every election season we deal with something else. So for example, if we have a major infraction of violation of fair play, this could include pre-campaigning. This is fair play because right now you're not playing in an equal field. You campaigned before, so you've had more advantage over the other candidates. So this would be considered an unfair play. You're not playing the game fairly. That would be considered a major infraction point. So depending on like the level of it, you would get either 10 to 15 demerit points. The reason as to why I can't tell you if it's going to be exactly 10 or 15 or 20 demerit points is simply because with each candidate, it's different. And every candidate gets an ERC member who looks into it specifically in detail, and then we determine as a whole how many it gets. So yeah, that's kind of the whole purpose of fair play. Like whenever you do something that's unfair to the other candidates specifically, that's a violation of fair play. And then again, there are also like other extreme like things that could happen, such as being like racially abusive or sexually aggressive in your post, but we've obviously never come to that level. It's mostly like internal between the candidates. I hope that kind of answers your question. Please let me know if I can elaborate a little more.
Most definitely. That was a great answer. Thank you very, very much. I also have another question regarding the same list of rules. Under the category of systemic harassment or excessive harassment towards voters or other candidates, could you maybe elaborate on that just a tad bit as well, just to inform everybody so that we're all on the same page?
No, of course, definitely. So usually like in campaigning week, it's kind of normal for everyone to receive 1 or 2 messages from candidates who are running. They might be like interested in just like texting you their ideas. Some of them might invite you for a call and talk to you about their ideas. Now, that's fine. These are just candidates who want to hear you out. Now, if you've said, for example, thank you, that's great, I'll consider it, and the candidate still continues to reach out to you and just kind of like overboard your entire like message system or your call system with campaign posts, now that could be considered as excessive harassment, because after you've given them your response, which is okay, great, thank you so much, I'll check it out later, they still continue to like bombard you personally with their post. So that can be considered as excessive harassment. This happens on a very individual level. So if you personally feel like a candidate specifically has been repetitively, non-stoppingly, like just reaching out to you, without kind of any consideration, then you would reach out to an ERC member, letting them know that this is what's happening, and you would send screenshots of it, and we would kind of analyze and see. And if there is excessive harassment, then obviously we're gonna go out for the candidate and try to solve the issue. But that's kind of what it is. It doesn't really happen on a collective level because it's systemized. Like we all know how many posts a day we're getting per candidate on Facebook and on their website and Instagram, but it's very on an individual level. If you feel like someone's just annoying you, like a borderline annoying, as soon as it feels like excessively annoying, you would have to reach out to an ERC member.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Back to you, Henry.
Thank you, Camilla. You brought up two very good points. So the first one is actually a bit more about the subjective nature of the case-by-case scenario. So back to the ERC committees, I know it's very individualized and case-by-case, and every candidate's different, every election is different, but are there some general guidelines behind the decisions that ERC member make in regards to how much demerit points they reward or not really reward in the positive sense, I guess, to a candidate who committed an infraction, or it's just really based on like a discussion process, but there's no really rules or regulations behind the ERC community's action?
No, we definitely have a process to go through. So first step would obviously be like, say like candidate X is reaching out to her ERC member. And so the first thing that the ERC member would do would be to text our group chat. And then together as a group, we would first validate like whether it's like a valid claim or not. If it was just like whatever, then we will let it slide. If it's a valid claim, then first we spend a meeting discussing whether it's a major or minor infraction, because that kind of really sets it apart. We kind of see, well, we have to see what rule they broke. For example, if it's simply like forgetting the header on like your Facebook post, then you would get 5 demerit points. That's pretty simple because it's usually just a logistical mistake that you can fix. But however, if we find out like throughout mid-election that you've been pre-campaigning and someone sends a screenshots of you pre-campaigning, then that obviously, once we discuss, would come off as a major infraction. And looking at where we would be in the election cycle, we would discuss as a team like how many points of a major infraction would we attribute to it. Because for this, we also have to consider like the level of the infraction itself. We have to, if it's pre-campaigning, then it's very serious. If it's a simple logistical error, then obviously it's very fine. So that's kind of the procedure that the MWR follows. We have our Google Docs where we like note down how many like everything. There is a very strict process to it. No, we don't just like sit and decide how many demerit points we're going to give to candidates. It's a pretty thorough one, and even last semester it took us days before we finalized at some demerit points.
I think last semester there might have been some confusion about the regulations among the candidates, especially for the subjective ones such as like harassment. Since it was our first semester online, you don't interact with people face to face. It's not too easy to know at what point it becomes too much. So we're hoping that this is our second semester online, like we know how to deal with this, hopefully. So we're hoping everything will be a lot better.
Understood.
Exactly.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for your answers. That was very, very clear. And on the same topic, actually, so my question would be, is Congress using precedents in the attribution of demerit points, or are they just going on every time it's a new process and they are not looking at precedents?
Precedent, do you mean like for candidates that are running like this semester, if we look at their precedent?
No, I'm meaning, for example, like even like in a legal situation, for example, there was a similar case in the past, and then the judge, for example, would make a decision based on that case because it was very similar to a present case. So,
Right.
would the ERC consider to use precedents in the past elections to make any sort of judgment on the present election?
Oh, yeah. If we were to make any like judgments or things to like quote unquote learn from the last semester, we have a list of things that have been like either slightly modified or changed this year, whether it's like making sure that new campaign material is only published on Facebook and Instagram and their personal websites, or making sure that they reach out to their ERC member as soon as they can with their elections posts. Like a lot of measures have been put into place to make sure that we don't kind of get to that same spot as last year, as Siwen was mentioning, of that online world where no one really was sure of what was happening, and there was, cases of a few individual cases of excessive harassment and everything. If this answers your question, but let me know if I'm missing something that you'd like me to say.
I'm more thinking along the lines, for
Yeah.
example, in making a decision. For
Okay.
example, if let's say this semester there was a candidate, I'm not saying anyone will do this, but if there's a candidate who's committing excessive harassment, so would we use, for example, the precedent from the last election, which was very similar to this one, to make a judgment based on how much demerit point they would win, I guess, or how much like infraction points, things like that?
This is a little hard to say because, again, this is not something that's been like clearly written out in our bylaws, and obviously with an online year it's very difficult to add things. So definitely for next year we're gonna add a little more specifics to it, but for this year at least, I know we cannot make a judgment on like a person's past actions, especially if it's been a while and if you've been disqualified or if you've been like anonymously like put in on Facebook, then you are more than most likely to have learned your lesson or something. So no, I don't think that this semester we won't look at how you ran in the previous semester, or like if you had 5 or 10. Obviously if you've been disqualified, that's a whole different thing. But no, for a regular candidate who just simply ran last semester, we would not look at like if they have 5 demerit points for logistical error, then we're not going to hold that into account this election. However, for the candidates that have been either disqualified or been anonymously put online, we do have to make a few considerations for them. And when I mean considerations, it's not like we're going to look back at like if they've had 25 demerit points, we're not going to add those to this one. What it means is that they simply need to learn things about election and fair play. So what we need to make sure is that like punishing people and giving them points for it is not going to do anything at all. These people, what we need to do with them is simply talk to them and let them know very explicitly why we put these rules into place. So at least for this semester, that's the approach that we'll be taking.
Understood. Yes, thank you for that. And yes, Camilla.
Yeah, thank you, Henry, and thank you guys for your answers. I have 2 little questions, if that's all right. The first is on the topic of club endorsement. So I was going through the list of rules, or in the Congress bylaws actually, under the section of club endorsement. And if I understood correctly, for a club to be able to endorse a candidate, 2/3 of the members in that club must unanimously voted on and agree that the club will endorse said candidate for the club to publicly endorse the candidate. But I was wondering, why is it mandatory that in the Google Forms that the club is to use to consider these decisions of the members? Why is it necessary for the members' personal information, such as names and student number, to be listed? And why could it not instead be an anonymous vote, perhaps? Because me personally, I do not have like an issue with it, but I can see some people being not comfortable publicly saying no, or feeling the peer pressure to vote yes for club endorsement if it seems like the other club members are for this candidate, since somebody will be seeing this data at the end of the day, and you might feel the pressure not to be the one standing out. So can I get your inputs on this?
Yeah, no, definitely. So first of all, just to like clear some, just to make some clarifications, the only people that get to see the data from the club endorsement Google Forms are not even the candidates, only the club execs and the ERC member. That's it. We don't publish the data from the club endorsement, so we don't really know who said yes and who said no, except for the ERC. But then again, we don't really care about that. We just want to make sure that the 2/3 is there. So that's kind of about the whole logistics of it, like as to who gets to see this information and who has access to this information. More about like the privacy aspect of it. So like if your name and everything, this is really for the ERC member to make sure that you're an actual member of that club. Like we need to know what your name is and what your student number is so that we can check, oh, are you actually in this club? Are you a member? We can maybe ask your execs if you're an active member. Like this is just like to make sure that everything is happening properly and safely and fairly, again, to make sure like no one made up a name just to like vote for you, or like you didn't just like make up a student number just to like say yes, just to get your club endorsement. So it's really just a safety precaution method that we kind of use to make sure that it goes smoothly and fairly, and that the people that are saying are going to vote for you are actually real people who do end up voting for you. But yeah, again, this is not information that is accessible to the public. It's really just for the ERC members and the club executives of the said club who get to see this information. Yeah.
Yeah, as a club exec myself, our club has endorsed a slate. Really, nobody else other than the executives and the ERC member gets to see the names. As for our club, as an example, we have many active members that are actually graduates. So like we do need their student numbers to be sure like you are currently studying at Marianopolis, or else it's kind of really weird getting a McGill student voting.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of like we need to just make sure you guys are like in the MSU and everything.
Yes, thank you. Thank you both so much for your answers. That really helps clear things up and explains a lot of the mechanics and the thinking that goes on behind the scene. Just very quickly, my only other question would be, so that the other day I was talking to a friend of mine who also goes to Marianopolis, and the funny thing is I brought up the elections and she wasn't even aware of the election going on. So I guess we all understand that in this situation right now with everything being online, not everybody uses every platform that is out there, and there's a lot of disconnection going on between different members of the student body with the staff, with the school. And so my question would be, how is Congress going to approach this problem to make sure that information regarding the election will reach as many students as possible?
Yeah, no, this is a really big topic, and not only for elections but for anything that Congress does. Like it's a really big, especially in this world where in this day and age it's hard for us to even keep in touch with our teachers, let alone being on like social media all the time and keeping up with our schoolmates and everything. Like it's a lot this semester, right? So this whole year actually. So yeah, no, just to like make some contextual points, this is a concern for across the board, let alone just elections. But elections specifically, as you said, most of the people in person, or like in person, for example, only about half of the student population votes. So yeah, that's kind of like the statistics in person. Now online, it's a whole different conversation, am I right? Like it's like we don't, obviously with school it's like do we go on Zoom or Google Teams or Google Meets, and like there's a whole different thing happening. So really, like the best way, obviously our target goal was to reach out to as many students as we can, but also do it in the most fair way as possible. Now the most like for example, like I don't know, like we tell all the students that we have the MSU Facebook group, and I know some people are not comfortable with having a Facebook account, but in case of that, candidates are also allowed to have a website where they can go and check out their campaign, or they're also allowed to use Instagram to kind of reach out to the most people that we could. The Director of Student Services, Letitia Jansen, sent out like a message on Omnivox informing people of when the elections are and when the dates are, and it should also be written like where you can go and check out their campaigns on top of their website. So that was kind of like our way of reaching out to like all students of Mary, but obviously, like I said, just in person, only less than half of them really care. In online, the numbers should also should be around the same thing, if not a little less. So with that being said, like right now, our best platforms are really like Facebook, where we have the most students in the MSU group. That way it really reaches out to them as much as it can. And yeah, so although that it is a little boring, and as much as Camilla, I would love for your friend to know about the elections and to kind of keep up with it, there is like to a certain extent to which Congress can go when it comes to like informing everyone no in this online world. Yeah, I don't know if you have any comments or things you want to say to that.
We highly suggest all students to read the Congress Weekly that MWR publishes every week. They're a really quite short summary of everything that's happening in MSU. We were supposed to announce the elections and the debates for this week and next week on our Congress Weekly this week, but our website decided to crash. So we'll be posting as MWR on Facebook still. So please keep a lookout for that if you want to keep up with the news.
Yeah, once again, thank you both for your answers. And thank you, Siwen, for reminding the students to check out the Marianopolis newspaper where you guys could keep up with the news. And thank you, Ms. Vice President, for your very elaborated answer. I'm sorry, I'm running out of words, but thank you very much. Henry, back to you.
Yes, back to the election in general. My question is actually regarding, I don't know if it's a potential loophole in the constitution or bylaw that needs to be fixed. So it's actually regarding the club endorsement. So a candidate, if he is belonging to a club and his club is endorsing him as a candidate, then he himself cannot sign the endorsement form. Am I wrong?
You're right. He himself cannot sign the endorsement form. If he does, then we don't count it.
Okay, understood. But however, if the candidate is running in a slate, for example, for vice president or president, his partner can potentially sign the form to endorse him because there's no really it's not written in the constitution that his partner or her partner cannot sign the endorsement for the candidate. However, a candidate running according to the constitution, he or she cannot endorse another candidate, so to speak. So would that be violating the constitution in a way, and should that be deserving of demerit points?
Right. So the rule that says that candidates are not allowed to endorse other candidates, this is publicly. So if, for example, like both Siwen and you were running for president, then Siwen would not publicly be allowed to endorse you on either Facebook or Instagram or like the other like social media platforms that other people use to endorse. So like that is kind of where the rule stops. Now, okay, so let's go specifically on the president, vice president club endorsement, since it's a slate endorsement. I think that's kind of what you were referring to. Well, the thing is, since they're voted upon separately, like when you actually vote, you will vote for your president separately and then for your vice president. Like they don't necessarily have to win together. So because you vote on them on an individual basis and they're only running together like as a sort of way to like share ideas and share a common platform, say like if you're running for vice president, then you could like in a club form, you could say I'm voting for this person as president, and it could just be like your personal vote, like to who you think should be president. In that case, your vote would count. However, publicly, you can't do it at all. Like if you do it, then infraction. But privately, it's not an endorsement. You're just simply saying like who you're gonna vote for. And obviously, again, this is done in a very private setting. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that answers my question perfectly. Thank you so much. Okay, so I guess some final question would just be regarding the candidates. We'll not be endorsing them in any way. We hope we don't show our biases in this podcast. We'll just be talking about their platforms, what they're running for, and their ideas, and what they will potentially bring to the MSU student body. So let's first start off with Ms. Ann Lin and Mr. Pratham.
So I can start with my own members of Congress that are here. So the first slate is Pratham Mehta, who is running with Ann Lin. Pratham is running for president. He is currently our coordinator of external affairs. Ann is currently our coordinator of internal affairs. They've both been doing a fantastic job on Congress this entire year, and I'm sure that you guys can check out their platform. They have a brilliant website as well as their Instagram and Facebook, same as the other three candidates. But so that's Pratham and Ann. They're both running in a slate. Pratham is running for president and Ann is running for vice president. The second slate is Holly and Neil. So they're both current students at Marianopolis, as you know. Holly is running for president and Neil is currently running for vice president. They've also laid out their entire campaign ideas regarding like the environment and like the logistics of it on Facebook. They have a website and they have their Instagram. So this is also the second slate. Holly is running for president and Neil is running for her vice president. And our last candidate who is actually running independently is Feiyang. Feiyang, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, so I won't butcher it, but Feiyang is running for president and he's running independently. He ran last semester as well for, I believe, coordinator of external affairs, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, coordinator of external affairs. And he's running again this year for president. And he also has a website as well as his posts on Facebook and his Instagram that you guys could follow to catch up more on. That's kind of all I can say about the slates and the candidates.
Actually, MWR will be having an interview with each of the candidates today, later in the evening. We'll be posting those interviews on the MSU Facebook page and the MWR Facebook page. Our team came up with a lot of really interesting questions, so please do look forward to that.
And we will post them in the video description or podcast description, depending on where you're listening. And just one final question regarding to the coordinators positions. So when will the coordinators candidates be known? And if we can know them now, can you also talk a bit more about their platforms?
No, we cannot know them before the coordinator campaigning week starts, unfortunately. I know you guys are very excited, but we haven't even finished the first week of elections yet. So we're going to wait a little bit for the second one to start. I don't even know about their platforms. No one does. No one is supposed to. No one is supposed to know about their campaigning or any ideas or even who they are before campaigning starts. The coordinators, I believe, will start April 5th that we start for the coordinators election. So, we will see all together on April 5th about the coordinators. And we can even do the same podcast for the coordinators, but more specifically to their positions as well, since actually it'll be a lot more positions. We also have appointments if you want to discuss appointments as well, Henry. But unfortunately for now, I cannot say anything about coordinators other than it starts on April 5th.
Then I will not ask for any more, unless Camila has more questions.
No questions regarding that, although I do look forward to another podcast similar to this covering the positions of the coordinators, maybe with the same guesses as well, since they've been lovely today. I have a tiny question. So if I understood correctly, second years are also invited to run for the president and vice president position, although are they going to graduate or?
Only second years who intend on staying here for the next academic year, like the full academic year, can run for president and vice president. So if you're taking a full third year and you're a second year right now, then because some people are in music or some people are in 3-year programs. So in that case, you can run in your second year, no worries. But if you're staying here, for example, like an extra semester, then that would not be, you wouldn't be eligible to run.
Okay, so only second years who meet the requirements are
exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Exactly.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Mao and Siwen, for coming onto the show. It was really lovely, as Camila said.
Thank you for inviting us.
It was really nice to be here. It was really nice talking to you, Camila and Henry. I love seeing faces. I love seeing first years. So it was really, really nice to talk to you. You guys are doing a fantastic job. I know this is a new club, so this is great. You guys are doing like super. I'm loving it. And yeah, I really hope we get to talk about the coordinators in a week or so.
Yeah, perfect. And with that, we'll end the podcast. And guys, if you're doing this on YouTube, the link to our newspaper will be down in the description below, as well as the interview for the upcoming candidates. Do be on the lookout for that. And if you're on a podcast platform such as Spotify, they will also be in the description. So just click on them and take it to your favorite place to get MSU news, which is MWR. And that's it for us. Thank you for listening, and enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you everyone for tuning in to listen. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we did during the interview.
We look forward to seeing you at our next broadcast. Cheers!